If you think about it, studio founders firstly have exposure to the success of their games. They also have the incentive to collaborate with each other because they own a part of Kepler. And if they're able to raise another studio up, they will all benefit collectively. That is the idea of Kepler.
Hi, I am Sophie Vaux, and this is the Rise and Play podcast. In the show, I sit down with influential thought leaders in the gaming industry to deconstruct how they create the best teams and company cultures in order to create the best games. Speaking to hundreds of game executives in the show, I have identified recurring patterns and mistakes that we all make in our leadership journey. Do you have to go through the same hurdles and make the same mistakes to learn too? You are not alone in this journey, and hopefully you can learn from a diverse range of seasoned leaders who already walked the talk. Every episode brings actionable insights and case studies that will help you improve your management skills, self-awareness, and empathic communication. Becoming a better leader starts with becoming a better human. Are you ready to unlock your full potential in life and business? Let's begin. So hi everyone, welcome to a new episode of Rise and Play, and today's super exciting topic, I'm with Kat Chu, representing Kepler Interactive, and a bit different from the previous episode where I'm focusing more on studio founders' journey. I'm also spending a bit more time also on different models of leadership, structure, organization on the publishing side. So Kepler is known, maybe in the space, for the unique co-ownership model. It's a global publisher and game developer built on that model of co-ownership, and it gives studios a stake in the business and a leadership role in strategic decision-making, which could sometimes be even the studios that are part of a portfolio. And at the same time, preserve the creative independence of a studio, enabling them to make fun and commercially successful games, appealing to a wide audience. Among the popular titles of the portfolio, there's Sifu, which is a martial arts roguelike by Sloclap. I have seen the game and played a bit, and so it was super cool to discover the game as well through the portfolio. And before we begin, especially about the values of the model and how it works in practice, I would like also to spend a bit of time to introduce our guest today, Kat, who's the Senior Director of Investments and Business at Kepler Interactive, and she leads investment and commercial conversation with developers and partners. So, Kat, welcome. So nice to see you after Gamescom, where we connected, offline, and now today we're connecting online with a podcast. Welcome.
Thanks so much for having me, Sophie. It's great to be here. I listened to many of your podcasts, and they've all been really insightful and authentic. I think I learned a lot.
Thank you. And that's also why I think aligned with the ethos of the podcast, I chose you because I like you. For the context, because I want to give a shout out. And Kat and Javian as well have been organizing for years the Game Changers events, gathering and network events, breakfast for women in games. And I've been part of them. Like some, I made amazing connections also with Tara at the time, the founder of Code Coven. And so that's how we connected. And that's why I was so excited as well to just, spend some time on the podcast. You totally fit in the lineup of guests with authenticity and also with impact and mission with impact.
We try. Thank you for coming to our breakfast event. Yes, I think you were able to make a big impact to the event, and it's nice to have all the women coming together and just having a safe space to connect with each other and find common interests in every topic. We always find that people walk away with friendships that kind of last a long time.
Yes. And that's important as well to have our meaningful network events, as we just discussed offline, where everyone can feel included to come, join, and connect with people that feel like them, That's how it is in the end. For the listeners who don't know yet about you, could you give a quick intro on your career and background in games and before games? And especially for me, the interesting part is the transition to join Kepler after King. Like, what was the whole journey for you, probably in investment, to then deciding consciously, I'm going to join Kepler and, follow the cause?
Sure. I mean, I guess on a surface level is a very, unfortunately, typical Ivy League to consulting to MBA, investments to a video game company, and then an investment role. I don't really think of it that way. I would say my journey kind of started as a child. I was very fortunate. My mother is a historian, so she authored many books. And among the siblings, we had a PC, which was quite rare at that time. And therefore, we managed to not only write a lot of things like poetry, bad poetry, and stuff, but we also managed to play a lot of video games. So the first video game was Tyrion, and then kind of progressed to others, iconically being Final Fantasy VII.
Oh yeah, I love that game.
Yes.
As well.
Oh my gosh. That game probably changed the trajectory of my life in some way, and I didn't know then. But I actually left home when I was 14, and I moved to Europe and was living kind of by myself most of the time. I was really into these kind of fantasy themed role-playing games like Oblivion and even Neverwinter Nights and Dragon Age, and that kind of spiraled. So when I went to college, I went to Cornell, and then I went to consulting, and then I decided to do an MBA for various reasons, mostly sports related. And when I started my MBA, I decided, for various reasons, I said, okay, I'm going to try to find an internship in video games. There's an opportunity to do it. And very luckily, I kind of quickly landed an internship at a product role at King in a team called Experimentation Group. And I mean, I had a blast during consulting. Don't get me wrong. If I hadn't gone to my MBA, I would probably still be there. But we were doing good work. But more importantly, we were really thinking about questions that were exciting to me, behavioral questions. And that was something that I never had a chance to do, even though in consulting, fine, I led UX teams and stuff, doing kind of customer experience type projects. I wasn't really able to think fundamentally about the nature of human behavior, and also that the only truth that really matters in the end of the day is empirical. And people are not always rational, and that's fine. You have a hypothesis and you test it, and in the end of the day, you can think you're the smartest person in the world, but the only thing that matters is the empirical, and that was something that I really liked. So then, I went around and did the full spectrum. During LBS, I did, early stage VC, growth stage, B2B SaaS. That was really fun. Mid-market private equity. But then at the end of it, I did enjoy growth stage type work. I had a conversation with a few people, and I decided that I wanted to spend more time in product. So I joined King. And that was, where I interned, I had a really good exposure very quickly to many different tests that, were not pure optimization tests. They really asked questions that I thought were very interesting about, how to improve, how to understand people better. And I think that's why I felt compelled to join. Eventually, the experimentation group kind of dissolved into various parts of King, and I did product strategy for 5 of our games, and I learned a lot, and I was actually really lucky to have weekly and fortnightly mentorships from people who are very experienced in product. I don't claim to be experienced in product, but it was very insightful for me. And again, it was the constant understanding that you come up with the best hypotheses that you can, but in the end of the day, the truth is the empirical. And that was something that was a truth that I like. The only truth is logic, for example, or empirical evidence. It's nice for me as a female doing roles that are very male dominated. Nice to know that, in the end of the day, the truth, what counts is logic and data.
Thanks a lot for sharing the very personal journey. And I can relate as well, with all the business consulting background. Like these days, everyone has done something different coming to games. After your time at King, what led you to then join Kepler?
So I was at King when COVID hit. There were pull factors to return to Singapore. I guess you could consider it a push factor because I wanted to leave Europe and go to Singapore. But I kind of received a very interesting offer from one of the founders of Kepler, and what they described seemed to me to make logical sense. Because what they described seemed to focus on building companies, on sure, acquiring companies, but giving them incentives that would keep us all aligned and engaged and growing. And that was something that was unique to me at the time. And I think it still is quite unique. And that's what convinced me to join, even though it was still a stealth startup in that time.
What appealed to me when I started to hear about Kepler, and it was not actually from you, but I also met recently the founder of Pixcap, Marina, and she's again founding a fund to support publisher. And she was mentioning Kepler as a very interesting and progressive model to disrupt, I would say, even the way of doing publishing. Totally understand how it made at the same time sense, like to solve maybe some publishing deals, problems, hurdles for young studio who were looking to, first of all, release the game, but not give away everything that makes the DNA of a studio special and magic. So while preserving it. So let's begin with more the foundation of Kepler, because even if you joined later or when it was in stealth mode, but you joined at the beginning, what was the thesis at the beginning of choosing a model this way? What were the founders trying to solve in the space of publishing that were not resolved basically with the current models? I'm very interested in that part.
Yes, I think it's probably helpful to rewind back to the beginning of Kowloon. And what's important is that Kowloon was a project financing model, and it was built upon many interviews, surveys, hearing what developers had to say and what their pain points were of traditional publishing models. And Kowloon Nights at the time was very careful to build a model that they believed answered the pain points of developers. And then at that time, it was a few things. One was related to autonomy, creative freedom, marketing freedom, being able to present their game in the way they wanted to, as per their vision. And that was important. And sometimes that could be lost because there was a misalignment in the brand and what the game is. Another thing was, for example, that we don't practice was a full recoup at the start, because sometimes publishers collected revenue and developers had cash flow problems at the start that it was difficult to resolve, and it would lead to them maybe taking decisions that they wouldn't really want to resolve the cash flow issues. So from the onset, we practice no full recoup at the start, at least for the initial budget. If the project runs well over budget, okay. But by and large, our principle is we don't want to force cash flow issues on our studios. And that was kind of the genesis of Kowloon. And there are other things, but the core was freedom. In the end of the day, creative freedom, operational freedom, cash flow freedom. Studios could use us and self-publish and find the expertise to self-publish in the future and be fully independent. It worked for a few studios, and we were really happy about that. But there were definitely a few studios that wanted a bit more out of the model. And that kind of was the foundation of Kepler. And again, it starts with a lot of interviews, a lot of discussions, a lot of surveys, a lot of focus groups, like what is the problem? And again, we have a focus on autonomy, creative autonomy, operational autonomy, but we understand that some studios want a path to growth. They want to be able to focus and be fully free to make their games and to establish ever increasing expertise and leadership in their own subgenres. We also recognize that studios, while having creative and operational autonomy, they also want some sort of financial freedom. They want to be able to focus on purely making games as well as they possibly can without having to worry every project or every year about financing them, and then therefore maybe even having to make some compromises in their games. Now, we wanted studios to own a part of their success. And that's where the co-ownership model comes in. We didn't want it to be a case where a studio would be majority owned by another entity and it would then release a very well performing game and the founders would not be able to benefit from that performance by the increase in value of their shares, for example. So then we adopted a co-ownership model, and as a part of an answer to the autonomy of the whole group, founders should believe that they have autonomy in the decisions of the whole group and are able to contribute to the group and are able to organically come up with ways to help the group succeed. That co-ownership model then began to make a lot of sense. Because if you think about it, studio founders firstly have exposure to the success of their games. They also have the incentive to collaborate with each other because they own a part of Kepler. And if they're able to raise another studio up, they will all benefit collectively. That is the idea of Kepler. I believe we have tried in every instance to practice this. For example, I know you mentioned some collective decision making, and we do have a weekly studio committee meeting where studio founders get together and we raise important business decisions, we raise important investment decisions. If there is a potential studio who would like to join Kepler, they will meet every one of our studio founders. Our studio founders provide that kind of cultural and value-based diligence, also diligence on their own expertise, and that forms a large part of our investment decisions. Every model has trade-offs, so ours is that we need to have alignment among all studios, but because of this, I believe that we're able to be organically quite sustainable.
Thanks for sharing so many elements to just bounce on, because there are some elements that are unfamiliar. I've heard so much around about the traditional publishing model and the pain point of developers. And again, going back to logic, what makes a lot of sense starting any business, when you think of the publishing as a service, you start with the audience. And here, I think in the foundation, that mindset to go and really understand deeply the pain points of the developers and how to create value as a collective or as a service. This is where you make a difference and you deliver higher value because you deeply understand, and it's not just you keep all the wins and then at the cost of the developer, which could be, it's not an intentional model, but that's the result when not really understanding deeply your audience, your customers. I remember meeting Lindsay many, many years ago, talking about the model. It's so good to hear a few years after how it has grown and crystallized into Kepler, of really starting to understand deeply and deliver a model and practice and iterate. So I just wanted to reflect on that first point, like starting always diligently, methodically with your customer and the needs and the pain points. You can't go wrong with that. And so building then a model, a business, service, publishing based on those findings, can't go too wrong with that. But then the execution matters. One point I want to follow up on is the collective decision making. I think it's great to have incentives aligned of a group because, we are humans and we can be motivated by desire, motivation, and so on. But there's also the financial incentive that is very tangible. And the fact that at least you leave no room for something else. Here is like, if others win, I win too, So in the mindset already from the beginning, for studio, there's value. How can I create value for others? Share my expertise. As a group, a collective, when one wants to join, what's the evaluation process? I'm sure maybe you can't go too much in detail, but more in the principles. If as a studio founder, I want to be part of Kepler, would I meet everyone? Are they decision makers in the end, like a proper interview process? Or is there a person that has the ownership of it and makes the ultimate decision making? and it's like more advisory process? Or is that like really co-ownership and consensus, I guess? I'm quite curious about how it works in practice, that part.
Yes. So I would say the latter. We are surprisingly transparent. So if a studio would like to join Kepler as a full Kepler studio, they would need to meet our Kepler studio founders. And I wouldn't call it an interview. I would call it like a conversation, a discussion, because usually potential studios really enjoy speaking with our Kepler founders. They speak about things they're comfortable with, what they want to build, how they organize their teams, things that they think really matter. Also, the second point is it's a two-way conversation, because just as we are trying to find out whether there are similar values between our Kepler studios and this potential studio, that studio we expect should be doing the same. Because in the end of the day, we don't want this to be a purely financially driven motive. We want it to be that a studio joins Kepler in order to grow and be part of Kepler. We don't want studios to come in because they want to have a sale and have an exit event. We want studios coming in who really want to take the opportunity to grow, to collaborate, to make games that they really want to make, that are true to their visions, unencumbered. Now, it is actually collaborative, so then after this process, we will discuss it as a group, and we will go through everyone's thoughts, and we will come to a consensus. And what we find is that Kepler studios have similar values, and there's no better judge of values than they are. To us, that kind of consensus is, in the end of the day, very important.
I'm curious some of those values, because it's a complex topic, because there are the values that you are aware of, but there are the real values that you actually are, that you live, you are. And I'm sure all those studios, they have those values in common that makes the collective a group. And also there are different flavors, which also are fine. So have you verbalized those core values with your words? Of course, I know it's much more complex than that, but at least the things that you observe in common of those studios that happen to be together in the end as a result.
Obviously, there are, how I would say, hygiene values. But yes, so yes, they should be morally correct in every way. But for us, when we talk about values, we want studios that want to make high quality, innovative experiences. When you look at our Kepler games, you will see that as a constant. You can see very brave and uncompromising dedication to quality, and something that is fresh and is innovative. It's not repeated or recycled. It is its own. And then there are other values like, for example, collaboration. We want to include studios into Kepler who are not only willing to collaborate with each other, but they want to. They want to help each other grow. And that's really important because, again, this is about incentives aligning. This is about finding synergies. That's important.
Other values that comes to mind? Like one is the ambition. I'd say like more, what is the ambition of a studio, the high quality games, having like the innovation, and the others like really not just being self-centered as a studio, like we'll fight for survival and or personal growth, but we want to collaborate and share. I just wanted to explore if there were other things that comes to mind.
So the other criteria that come to mind, for example, the studio has to be sustainable. There has to be good leadership, and it needs to be well put together. Every role should be filled. There are other criteria, like the game needs to have market potential. We like studios who are leaders in their own subgenres or niche genres, because in that way, first of all, they're not cannibalistic to each other, and second of all, they can grow as a genre leader.
Mm-hmm.
They have space to grow. In the end of the day, I personally can envision Kepler Studios taking leadership positions in their own subgenres
Mm.
and being kind of a company where when you see a game, you know that is a Kepler game. With that kind of quality and innovation and identity, it should be a Kepler game.
Yeah. And I do see actually when I was going through the portfolio of games, that innovative freshness I like as well, like playing a lot of games that have a unique appeal. Can't always explain why, but some resonated quite well with me. So do I understand as well then there's an aspect of complementary that you look into as well of studios? And this is leading also to my question here. How in practice sometimes studios can help each other? I assume some of them have maybe more strength or expertise, whether it's, I don't know, marketing, PR, community management, or leadership, people, department, development practices. What have you seen in practice that studios can really share, maybe for also some that consider to join the collective? What are they bringing to the table, you know?
Yes, so that's really interesting. I would say it goes even deeper than
Mm-hmm.
that. The first time I went to a studio committee meeting and I learned that, there was a studio that had some challenges with their game and another studio just sent some programmers over to help them. And the first time I learned about that, I was very surprised because, first of all, it was purely organic. It was their own idea. And second of all, for me, it was a proof point that if you create the incentive and you don't force adoption, but have studios with similar values who can organically choose what they want to use, they will naturally want to help each other. So for me, that was a big eye opener. And it's happened multiple times
Mm.
that where studios will just organically help each other. We have, for example, studio founders that have taken up tech leadership roles. They want to find a way to create technical synergies. They are very involved in organizing, for example, weekly discussions, tech sharing discussions. And that was also quite unique because none of this was things that we ourselves mandated or, organized. It was something that they wanted to do. And again, it comes down to, incentives. I think in the end of the day, things are quite simple, but foundationally, they need to be correct.
Yes.
If you align people's mindsets, they do whatever themselves naturally. And of course, we provide support, centralized support for anyone who, again, is not mandated to use it, but wants to use it.
Mm.
For example, our IT department, our HR department, our publishing department is free for all our studios to use. And there is widespread adoption. The fundament has to be there. People have to want to collaborate. They have to want to find synergies. It's not like you put it on a PowerPoint slide and then you say you have to do this. Blah, blah, blah. This is the synergies that we will incur and da da da. And this is the model. But you have to create a space where people want to grow together, and they will do it. They will find a way to very organically adopt centralized support functions, explore synergies amongst each other, and be very happy and inspire each other. And I think that's what's important.
Yeah, it's quite fascinating actually what you just shared, because for me it reminds me of team and team dynamics. And basically in teams you create the system, you create the culture, the values, and who's part of the system. And here there are 2 points that are fundamental for this to work with what you just shared, where the studios are really helping each other, even sending staff and so on. I've never heard of it, to be honest. Usually it's like so protective, and it's like, even in companies, you have games that are protecting their games. I've seen that a lot, internal competition, but here it's towards collaboration. And it's more credit to the system and the foundation you lay out as a model. Again, back to the system, the incentive, the values, how it works in practice, leaving options for studios to use or not. like leaving that autonomy. You said like the creative autonomy at the core of the values, and who you choose to get in the model that will not break the model, right? So it's really important who gets in. And that makes even more sense that the collective who have been preserving the model, using it to grow, to be organic, to have an eye on who comes in to not then start to change the model by a change of behavior and teams and mindset, right? So it is beautiful to see as a result how it works just by laying the ground and let things organically happen. And that's what happens when you trust people, teams, studios to do the right thing, building the right system, right incentive, and with the right group, things happen.
Yeah, that's also why we bring in our studio founders for every investment opportunity, because again, their perspectives are so important, because in the end of the day, the system has to accommodate everyone, every studio founder. They have a lot of autonomy. We trust them with a lot.
How many studios are you today? And the games you're focusing on, is it any platform or is specifically console and PC?
We're 10 companies, 9 studios.
Wow.
One of them is a publisher themselves, so but 10 companies. And the games that we do are premium games. They're primarily PC console. What matters to us is that they are premium. But keep in mind that we also publish third-party games, and we also do project financing. Kowloon is still alive and heartily financing projects that we believe in, but whose studios are not part of Kepler. I don't think that we are a model that will grow massively. We're not set up to acquire lots and lots of studios, for example.
Yeah, so that leads to my last question and point, because I was wondering about scalability, and I think you answered it already partially, where you will probably meet new challenges by being 10 to 100, so you're not a holding company, from what I understood, although I've seen like the crazy growth of those kind of models. But then I wonder more about here Kepler as, again, the collective, the ambition and the growth. Do I understand correctly, like the growth is not necessarily in acquiring more studios, but more growing the value per studio for the studio to grow from each other and be, like you said, leader in their subsegment?
Exactly. So there is inorganic growth and organic growth, right? And I respect companies that scale quickly through inorganic growth, and there are some companies that have done it very well. We're not in the business of doing that. We are in the business of acquiring inorganic growth if the values truly align, and then stimulating organic growth through, I like to use the word synergies. I think in our case, it is an accurate term. So when we say organic growth, it's through stimulating organic synergies. And so, yes, you're talking about pros and cons and scalability. I think we could never scale inorganically to the extent that other companies have. That's not our intention, and our intention is to scale organically, and by which we mean collaboration. And we think that's possible. If you talk purely revenue, yes, you can buy revenue, but our intention is to build revenue by building our companies. I don't think that makes us less scalable eventually when you look at long-term sustainability.
Yes.
I think that helps us actually sustain growth in a way that keeps everybody happy, engaged, growing well, and making great games.
Yeah. And that's refreshing to hear about growth. Something that I will take away for sure is the organic growth and scalability, because what we see in the space, especially the past year, it's, if you can say unorganic, it's fast growth, scalability, and then there's a cost of it. So here there's really an intention in growing with the capacity and logically with the development and also for the sustainability of the studios. And that leads to my very last question here. This model to me works when you have ownership of how fast you want to grow. If you have RVC backed, I'm not sure you can decide how fast you want to grow. So I wonder here if you can share how independent are you as a company to decide your terms of your growth and, how you want to grow and where you're going?
I'd say we are fully dependent by our studio founders
Yes.
because they have to build up to a stage where they can make increasingly more ambitious games in a sustainable way. And the dependency lies with them. And I think that if there is a trade-off between scaling incredibly quickly and growing sustainably, we should take the long-term view. And at the end of the day, that would be our consensus.
Yeah, and you answer the question in a way like the stakeholders at the end of the day and shareholders are the studio founders. And because you're aligned in that long-term view and sustainability, then you don't have to compromise there because that's how you see the growth, right?
Yes. My belief is that there is a trade-off between scaling at all costs, which we try to avoid, and which our model by nature will avoid. But I would argue that if you take a 5, 6, 7, a longer time perspective, in the end of the day, having sustainable, true growth would have scaled more. But the truth is empirical. So
Yes. And we are going like back full circle, back to the beginning. I love
exactly.
it. Yeah. And I'd love to be around to ask you 5 years, 6 years from now, where are you with Kepler? I really believe in those times. Model makes a lot of sense. We've also where the motivation, of studio founders are going. Not everything has to be purposed towards money, financial. Of course, it's important as a result to keep,
Yes.
growing, paying
Yes. Of course.
people the basic things of business. However, it's a model that speaks more and more to a generation of game studios that want to build on a sustainable basis. So it's great to hear at least the best practices, the limits as well of the model. And I look forward to seeing where you're going. So to close the conversation today, Kat, what are you excited about for what's the future or at the end of the year? For whatever you can share, of course.
We have some really exciting games coming out next year that I'm really excited about. To repeat myself, I can share those that are announced, but I think what really excites the whole team and all of us is really making very unique, innovative experiences. And that's something that I hope we can do. I hope next year proves it. Sharing games that haven't been experienced before, that's what drives us in the end of the day. And hopefully you will enjoy them.
Yeah, I look forward to. I will follow it closely for sure. Now that I've been more aware, at least of the Kepler, so I look forward to it, and I can totally sense your excitement right now. So
Thank you. I am excited, actually. We all are.
yeah, thanks a lot, Kat. I learned a lot through the conversation about the model, and I hope it inspires others, developers, publishers, any ecosystem that want to, make the industry more sustainable, to take some practices of what you shared today with a lot of transparency. So I appreciate that as well. Thanks, Kat.
It was fun.
Yeah, look forward to seeing you in Singapore.
Yes, let me know when you're coming over.
All right, take care.
Bye-bye.
Bye. Thanks for listening to this latest episode of Horizon Play podcast. I am growing a community of conscious leaders across the industry and beyond. If you want to join this movement, please share the podcast with other conscious leaders because we have so much more we can learn from each other. If you've enjoyed this episode, please follow and rate the show on Spotify or your other favorite podcast platform. It will help other growing leaders to discover the show and benefit from the valuable insights. If you would like to grow rapidly your leadership skills, you can find more insights on riseandplay.io, where you will also find my free masterclass on conscious leadership and other resources that I offer. Have a great week, and remember to take care of yourself. Until the next time.